and fast till he gets the ball. Once he gets it, to come under control and button hook slightly. Key the block on the linebacker, or key the block of the YN. If the YN has the linebacker taken out, he cuts inside. If the YN has the linebacker in, he comes all the way around. If you look at this play, what we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here, and try to run this play in the alley.
The NFL has always been a game of adaptation. Every time an offense discovers a new way to attack a defense, the rest of the league scrambles to find an answer. Then, once defenses adjust, offenses evolve yet again. It's a never-ending chess match that shaped professional football for more than a century. But if you travel back in time and watch the NFL game from the 1960s, you might barely recognize it. Today's NFL is dominated by superstar quarterbacks, complex passing concepts, and versatile playmakers who can line up almost anywhere on the field. Teams throw the ball more now than ever, offenses are built around creating mismatches, and coordinators spend countless hours searching for the next innovation. It always hasn't been like this, though. There was a time when running backs were the biggest stars in football, a time where quarterbacks were asked to manage games rather than carry franchises, a time when defensive backs could practically wrestle receivers to the ground, and passing for 4,000 yards seemed impossible. So how did we get here? How did the NFL transform from a run-first league into an offensive arm race we see today? How did quarterbacks become the most valuable players in the sport? And why, after decades of becoming more pass-heavy, is the league beginning to trend back towards the run? Today we're tracing back the complete evolution of the NFL and offense in it. From the ground and pound offensive football of the 1960s to the spread them out revolution of the 2010s, the rise of the superstar quarterback, and positionless offense that we see today. This is the evolution of the NFL offense. Back when the NFL was first taking shape, the game was much simpler and offenses were built around one core principle: run the ball. Running the ball was viewed as the most consistent and safest way to move the ball downfield, especially in an era where passing was far more difficult and far less efficient than it is today. Think back to that time, and the players that come to mind are often tough, physical defenders or bruising running backs who define the identity of the league. Football was a ground and pound sport, so much so that running backs were routinely winning MVPs, something that feels almost unthinkable in today's NFL. Running backs weren't just important, they were the centerpiece of an entire offense. Teams roughly averaged 29 rushing attempts per game, consistently leaning on the ground attack to control tempo, field position, and possession of the ball. Take the 1965 season as an example. Jim Brown rushed for 1,544 yards, a total that would still be considered an excellent season in today's NFL. Meanwhile, the league's leading passer, John Brody, threw for 3,114 yards. While respectable in the era, that number would be viewed as closer to an average quarterback season rather than an MVP level performance. Offense at that time were structurally designed around the run game. Formations like I formation, two-back sets, and tighter offensive line formations were the norm. These structures naturally supported downhill rushing attacks and play-action passing, rather than the spread-out concepts that we see dominate the modern game. But why was the game shaped this way? The answer most likely lies in how different football was at the time. The NFL was a far more violent game, physically punishing, and many of the rules that protect the offensive players today simply just did not exist back then. Defensive backs could be far more aggressive with receivers, pass rushers faced fewer restrictions, and contact that would draw penalties today was often considered part of normal play. Take Deacon Jones' signature head slap as an example. Because of that, passing games carried significantly more risk. Receivers were harder to protect, quarterbacks were under more consistent pressure, and timing-based ball passing concepts were far less reliable. As a result, many teams concluded that the reward of passing the ball was simply not outweighing the danger. So, offenses leaned into what worked: power running, physicality, and controlling the line of scrimmage. That philosophy would define the early decades of the NFL and set the stage for every offensive evolution that followed. So what changed? The answer can be traced back to one of the most influential rule changes in the NFL, the Mel Blount rule. Implemented in 1978, the rule prohibited defensive backs from making significant contact with a receiver more than 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. While it may have seemed like a minor adjustment at the time, the impact on offensive football was enormous. Before 1978, the NFL was still a run-first league. Teams consistently ran the ball more often than they passed. In some seasons, the split was dramatic, as 60% would be run and 36% pass. Even in years when passing became more common, rushing attempts still outnumbered the pass attempts across the league. The Mel Blount rule changed the math. With defensive backs no longer able to physically punish receivers all over the field, passing became more efficient and more attractive to offensive coordinators. Almost immediately, innovative coaches began developing systems designed to take full advantage of the new landscape. Two offensive philosophies emerged that would permanently reshape football as we know it: the West Coast offense and Air Coryell. Both systems challenged conventional wisdom. At the time, most defenses were built primarily to stop the run, a fact that these teams exploited by forcing defenses to cover every inch of the field through passing. While their goals were similar, their methods were very different. The results were immediate. League-wide average passing attempts per game jumped from roughly 25 in 1977 to nearly 32 by 1981, a dramatic increase in just 4 seasons. The NFL was beginning its transition from a run-first league to a quarterback-driven one. The West Coast offense was developed by legendary coach Bill Walsh. Originally created while Walsh was an assistant with the Cincinnati Bengals, the system was designed to maximize the strengths of quarterback Ken Anderson, whose game relied more on timing and accuracy than elite arm strength. When Walsh became the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, he refined the offense into one of the most influential systems in football history. The philosophy was simple: use short, precise passes as an extension of the run game. Rather than attacking defenses vertically, the West Coast offense stressed them horizontally. Quick passes forced defenders to cover the entire width of the field, while giving receivers opportunities to create yards after the catch. The system also helped popularize the use of running backs as legitimate receiving threats. Few players embodied this better than Roger Craig. In 1985, Craig became the first player in NFL history with both 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in the same season, demonstrating how versatile offensive weapons could thrive in Walsh's scheme. If the West Coast offense attacked defenses horizontally, Air Coryell attacked them vertically. Developed by Don Coryell and perfected with the San Diego Chargers during the late 1970s and early 1980s, Air Coryell emphasized aggressive downfield passing concepts combined with a strong run game. The offense sought to stretch defenses from sideline to sideline and from the line of scrimmage to the deepest part of the field. In Air Coryell, explosive plays were the objective. Deep routes, vertical concepts, and aggressive play calling put constant pressure on defensive backs. Rather than patiently working down the field, the offense looked to strike quickly and often. The system also revolutionized the tight end position. Coryell viewed tight ends as receiving weapons, capable of creating mismatches against linebackers and safeties. Players like Kellen Winslow became focal points of the passing attack, paving the way for future stars such as Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, and Kyle Pitts, just to name a few. However, no player benefited more from Air Coryell than the quarterback, Dan Fouts. Before the 1978 season, only one quarterback in NFL history had ever thrown for more than 4,000 yards in a season. Fouts shattered expectations. He became the first quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons, posting 4,082 yards in 1979, 4,715 yards in 1980, and 4,802 yards in 1981. What seemed impossible was becoming the new standard. Together, the West Coast offense and Air Coryell laid the foundations of modern NFL. One emphasized precision, timing, and yards after the catch. The other prioritized aggression, verticality, and explosive plays. Yet both arrived at the same conclusion: the future of football belonged in the passing game. Seeing just how effective the passing game could be, the NFL began moving towards increasingly pass-driven offenses. Quarterbacks became more valuable than ever, and in the mid-1980s, one player would accelerate this trend unlike anyone before him. Quarterbacks such as Dan Fouts and Joe Montana helped open the door for modern passing games, but Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins blew that door off its hinges. In 1984, Marino threw for 5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns, shattering records that many believed were untouchable. At a time when most teams still relied heavily on running games, Marino showed what was possible when offenses were built around an elite passer. After Marino's dominance, the superstar quarterback became the most sought-after asset in the NFL. Every franchise began searching for its own signal caller, fueling an arms race that would define the next several decades of the NFL. This era produced some of the greatest quarterbacks the game has ever seen: Dan Marino, Warren Moon, John Elway, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Kurt Warner, and Tom Brady, just to name a few. Many of the trends we see today in offense trace their roots back to this period. Passing production exploded across the league. 4,000-yard passing seasons, once considered extraordinary, became increasingly common. Since 1997, every NFL season has featured at least one quarterback surpassing 4,000 yards. As quarterbacks became the focal point of offense, they were entrusted with more responsibility at the line of scrimmage. Audibles, hot routes, protection adjustments, and pre-snap reads became the standard part of the position. The quarterback was no longer simply executing the play call. He was becoming an extension of the coaching staff on the field. Defenses, however, were not going to sit back and watch offenses take over the game. As passing concepts from Eric Coryell and the West Coast offense became more sophisticated, defensive coordinators searched for the answer. Their solution was pressure. Blitz packages became increasingly creative and aggressive. Because many concepts relied heavily on a 5 to 7 step drop, defenses sought to disrupt the timing by forcing quarterbacks to make quicker decisions under pressure. Offenses eventually developed their own counter, the shotgun formation. While the shotgun had existed for decades, it became far more prominent during the late 1990s and especially the 2000s. By aligning several yards behind the center, quarterbacks gained additional time and space to process the defense. The shotgun allowed passers to identify blitzes, diagnose coverages, and make quicker decisions before the pass rush could arrive. It also opened the door for offensive coordinators to experiment with new formations, route combinations, and spacing concepts. Receivers could get into routes faster, quarterbacks could get the ball out quicker, and offenses could attack defense in a way that previously was difficult to execute from under center. By the end of the 2000s, the NFL had fully embraced the passing revolution. The quarterbacks had become the centerpiece of every franchise, and the stage was set for the next evolution of football. With the era of the superstar quarterback firmly established, the NFL began searching for new ways to help young quarterbacks succeed. One of the biggest developments was the introduction of college concepts into professional offenses. As the college game began changing in a different direction, NFL coaches began borrowing ideas that could ease the transition for young quarterbacks entering the league. Few players symbolized this shift more than Cam Newton. Before Cam Newton entered the NFL, there was a fairly rigid quarterback archetype. Tall pocket passers who could beat defenses from within the structure of the offense. Mobility was considered a bonus, but it was far from required. Newton challenged that mold completely. Built more like a defensive end than a quarterback, he possessed rare athleticism, elite arm strength, and one of the strongest frames in the NFL. Prior to players like Newton, quarterbacks with unique gifts were often expected to conform to traditional NFL offenses, but with Newton, things were different. Rather than forcing him into an established system, the Panthers built an offense specifically designed around his strengths. The Panthers incorporated spread concepts, read option plays, and designed quarterback runs that allowed Newton to utilize his athleticism while still developing as a passer. Instead of asking the players to adapt to the scheme, the scheme adapted to the player. This philosophy began to spread throughout the league. NFL offenses became more diverse as coaches blended traditional pro-style concepts with ideas borrowed from the college game. At the same time, the passing game continued to evolve. Rule changes that favored offenses, combined with increasingly aggressive passing attacks, helped fuel an explosion in quarterback production. The 2011 season perfectly illustrated this transformation. For the first time in NFL history, 3 quarterbacks surpassed 5,000 yards in the same season, an achievement that highlighted just how drastically offense had changed. The rigid thinking of the NFL's old guard was beginning to fade as a new generation of coaches embraced innovation and challenged long-held assumptions about what offense could and should be played. As the league became more willing to build around the strengths of players rather than forcing players into predefined systems, the foundation was laid for the modern NFL. Quarterbacks were no longer expected to fit a single mold. The offenses were no longer limited to a single philosophy. That evolution brings us to the NFL we see today. Today, NFL offense has began trending back in the opposite direction. After years of heavy passing dominating the league, the run game has experienced a major renaissance. As defenses have adapted to limit explosive passing plays through too high safety systems and lighter boxes, offenses have responded by emphasizing the run game and utilizing heavier personnel packages. Rather than relying solely on schematic advantages, modern offenses are increasingly looking to create personnel mismatches. This shift has dramatically increased the value of the tight end position. In many ways, tight ends have become the queens of NFL chessboard because they can do everything. They can block in the run game, catch passes at all levels of the field, and create mismatch problems against multiple defensive positions. As a result, offenses have began leaning more on 12 personnel or 13 personnel. These formations are designed to force defenses into more difficult decisions. When offenses deploy heavy personnel, defenses often respond by bringing in an additional linebacker onto the field and moving into more traditional base packages. However, this is exactly what many modern offenses want. By forcing linebackers onto the field, offenses can attack their weaknesses in pass coverage. Tight ends, slot receivers, and running backs become favorable matchups against linebackers in space, creating opportunities for explosive plays through the air. And on the other hand, if defenses choose to stay in nickel personnel to defend the pass, offenses can simply lean into the running game. Smaller nickel defenders often lack the size and strength needed to consistently hold up against the run, giving offenses another schematic advantage. This constant battle for personnel matchups has become one of the defining trends of the NFL today. Offenses are no longer just trying to out-scheme defenses. They are trying to force defenses into impossible choices, ensuring that no matter what the defense chooses, the offense always has a favorable answer ready. As NFL offenses continue to evolve, defenses will inevitably search for the counterpunch. Throughout league history, a pattern has emerged. Every 5 to 10 years, a new offensive trend rises to prominence and forces the rest of the league to adapt. With more teams attempting to replicate the success of offenses built around versatile personnel, such as those by the Rams and the Seahawks, tight ends have become increasingly valuable. Their ability to block, catch passes, and create mismatches make them essential in today's NFL schemes. As a result, teams have placed a greater emphasis on finding athletic tight ends through the draft and free agency. Defenses, however, are already developing an answer. The rise of the big nickel reflects the NFL's search for defenders who can match the versatility of modern offenses. Players such as Nick Emmanwori and Derwin James represent the blueprint teams are pursuing. Hybrid defenders who combine the coverage skills of a nickel cornerback with the physicality and run-stopping ability of a linebacker. As offenses become increasingly positionless, defenses are following the same path. NFL offenses have taken many forms over decades, from the power running attacks of the 1960s and 70s to the passing attacks vertical offense that dominated the 2010s. While the schemes may change, one truth remains constant. Teams will always look for new ways to exploit defenses and gain an edge. Because of that, offenses will never stop evolving, and the chess match between offense and defense will continue to shape the NFL as we know it. Thanks for watching.
Midway presents NFL Blitz. Hey! Versus
60 years, men have been devising ways to advance the football. But perhaps the most spectacular and exciting way is through the forward pass. Someone once said, when you put the ball in the air, 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are bad: interceptions and incompletions. But passing is and always will be a lethal offensive weapon. Let's face it, the most memorable plays in football history have occurred when the quarterback has gone to the air.
23-22 in favor of Cleveland. And the Vikings trail by 1, but the crowd has not given up yet. 5 seconds left, first down, Cleveland 46. 3 wide receivers right, Kramer back to pass. He's going deep, down the right side, and it is fought for, and it is touchdown!